Hey, welcome to Learn DGLux5 series. I'm Paul Sinenko, and for this episode, we're not going to have an intro video like we usually do, partially because fires all over the Northern California here basically mean that kids stay inside all day, and that pretty much makes it impossible to record any decent amount of video. So we're just going to straight to the controls, as I say, and just dive in. So in this episode, we're going to be continuing to work on our zone drawing tool. If you recall, in the last episode, we've created a tool that's capable of drawing zone geometry. Well, today in this episode, we're going to expand it and make what we draw interactive. Basically, create ability to select and hover over those zones. Add ability to add some basic zone information like zone name and path node, and also ability to remove a created zone. So let's go ahead and dive in that. Now we're going to have another episode following this that's going to look at a consumption widget that will basically take all the information we collect using this tool and will be capable of rendering those zones for your end user in consumption mode. So, but that will come next week. For now, let's go ahead and dive into our tool and see how we can make it better. Well, so we're looking at the zone tool where we left off last week. So I'm going to go ahead and pick a floor plan so it doesn't look so lonely here with a just blank dark screen. We're going to pick one of the floor plans that we've used last time and upload. And let's create a few zones so we're not working with blank screen. One improvement that I want to make right away, which I sort of noticed as I was playing with this tool, is that right now I'm sort of tempted to try and finish the polygon by basically going back to the origin, which I actually don't have to do or should not do, right? Because when I double click, it will finish it for me. It'll draw that last segment for me. But because intuitively I'm trying to finish the polygon myself, I always end up with one extra vertex somewhere here, because in the last second I remember, oh yeah, I could have just double clicked on the previous one, but now I'm here, so I have to double click. Again, so we're going to address that first. Basically, what I want to do instead of this is to always have a closed polygon so that it's pretty clear that you don't need to finish it off yourself. So for that, let's travel to our capture group. This is where, if you recall, the polygon, the currently drawn zone is being generated. And this is, well, yeah, here it is, right? So this is the block that creates concat of currently drawn zone that's currently being drawn. So let's go ahead and start drawing it like this, right? And we'll just keep it on well, here, like this. So here, if you notice, look, this is basically what I've already plotted, right? So this is what I've clicked, set of coordinates, and I'm adding the current X and Y of the mouse, and that's basically what is drawing my black lines here. So instead of doing that, or in addition to doing that, I'm going to add one more coordinate, right? So it's going to be space, and then here it will be one more coordinate that will connect my mouse to the origin, right? So origin, it can derive from the current zone. This is where I store my coordinates. I'm going to use the aggregation table in that to get my first coordinate, because that's going to be my origin, right? So chord is the field, right? This is a table, just to remind you. I just have a single column called chord, right? And first is the aggregation method. It gets us this. The only problem is it's separated by a colon, not by a comma. So I'm just going to use a replace block like this, and replace colon with a comma. Right, the result of that, of course, is going to go into my input 4, and basically now we have this. So now when I draw, I will always see that connection to the to the origin, right? And now I no longer feel compelled to close the polygon myself. Right, so this is just, I think, a more intuitive method for a user. Now, alternatively, we could have, created a logic that checks if you clicked close enough to the origin point where we determined that you probably wanted to close the polygon, and if that happens, we can basically insert the origin, close out the polygon and say that you're done drawing. But it's much more complex logic, which this tool doesn't need, right? Because again, this is a service tool, and it needs to be kind of simple and robust. Nothing fancy here. Okay, so here's that. And then one more thing I wanted to change from aesthetic standpoint, that line of drawing the polygon, instead of this kind of big black line, I want to actually change it to kind of a bit thinner dashed line. So if you recall, the curtain zone repeater is what's rendering those lines, right? So I'm going to go to trace back my SVG code. This is where it's coming from. Open up here. Right, and first of all, I'm going to reduce the stroke size to 2. And I'm going to add, and hopefully I remember this correct. So that's a semicolon, and then, and if I recall my SVG syntax correctly, and for that, there's always Google. But I think I can manage this one. So it's stroke dash array equals, sorry, not equals, colon 5, comma 5. So that should give us a 5 pixel line and 5 pixel break. Yes, okay, so there it is. That's basically what I was looking for, and I'm fine with that. I'm going to close it out. All right, and that's basically, from now on, that's a method to draw zones. So we're there. Now we're ready to move on to the next section. All right, so now the next item on my list is making those zones responsive, having them respond to hovering and clicking. On hover, I want to change the opacity from 40% to 70%, so basically make it more prominent. And on click, I want to change the color to yellow. So this presents a bit of a challenge. As you have already noted by now, that we don't actually have physical shapes that we can touch, click, and work with their properties to affect any of their parameters. Everything is rendered from a table, and that's what we need to interact through. But as far as getting the data back specifically, we need somehow to get a value, an ID of a currently hovered zone. That's going to be a little bit tricky, so you're going to have to follow along here so you don't miss anything. So first things first, what I want is a string block to put it in, right? I already took a liberty of creating a couple here. So just a regular string block, called it hover zone. I'm going to post the unique ID of the zone that I'm hovering over in this block. And this one, of course, is going to contain the ID of a zone that I've clicked while hovering. Right, so these blocks are there. So now we need to work on the mechanism to populate them. First of all, we need to make sure we can properly capture the mouse over those zones. Right now, so you can see that my cursor is set to hand on my SVG repeater. However, when I mouse over it, you don't see the hand cursor. This means that the mouse events don't even make it to this layer, right? This capture group intercepts them, right? So the current zone repeater is, the mouse is completely turned off on that one because it doesn't need to interact with mouse in any way. It just reflects the zone that you're currently drawing. But this capture group does need to interact with the mouse, and it's completely blocking the SVG repeater. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the SVG repeater to the top, right? So now layer-wise, it's on top. And I'm going to go to my advanced properties, find a property called click-through, and enable it. This will allow this particular repeater to pass events down to the next layer in any spot of this group where there is no object, right? So when I'm over a zone, right, the zone will intercept the mouse event. However, when I'm not, right, any mouse event, whether it's click or mouse movement, just goes straight to the capture group, is being captured by the capture group, right? So that means I can no longer start drawing zone on top of another zone, right? You see that my capture group simply does not get any events from here. But as soon as I click outside, right, now my capture group starts seeing the mouse again and responding accordingly. All right, so so we got the mouse figured out. Now we need logic to output unique ID. So for that, I'm going to use data type symbol. The SVG repeater does allow you to specify a symbol to show up when you hover over as a data type. I'm going to use that symbol to actually write a value out to this hover zone block. So first I need a symbol. So I'm going to go ahead and add a group right to the stage. Switch to design mode so you can see it. This is the group. Give some basic shape parameter to it. Now, it's going to be invisible eventually, so it's not going to be a visible object. But for now, while I'm working on this, I'm also going to use it to kind of confirm that I'm seeing the correct UUID when I hover over a zone. So that's why I'm making it basically a shape that would be good showing just a line of text. So I'm going to convert this to a symbol. Again, it does not matter where it is in the outline because we're going to work on it completely out of context. So convert to a symbol. We'll call it SVG tooltip. All right. And I'm going to go ahead and edit. So first thing I'm going to need is the UUID property. Right, so that SVG repeater can pass appropriate UUID to each instance of this tooltip. So this is how how my symbol will get its corresponding UUID. Next, I want to show it. So I'm going to add a text box in here. Just blow it right up to the 100%. I don't want green, just do gray with white background. And mid alignment, and I'm just going to bind this UID straight to here. All right, so now, before I go any further, let's test it out. All right, so now I have this symbol called SVG tooltip. So I'm going to go to my repeater, zone repeater, and use this as my data tip. Right, and I need to open my table, go to this renderer that I now have here, the data tip renderer. Unfortunately, I cannot edit this in place, so I cannot do right-click, edit. Otherwise, everything would have been much simpler. This will be available soon, but it's not at the moment, so we have to do it the way I'm doing it. So I need to take UUID column and bind it to my UUID property of my renderer. It looks like it's already pre-bound, I think because I was playing with it earlier, and it just kept the binding in memory. Ignore that. So basically just take UID column, not a cell, but a whole column, and drag it over. So now, if I did it right, when I mouse over a zone, I should see a data tip with the zone's UUID, right? And that's exactly what I'm seeing. And each one has its own, so I'm not seeing the same thing over and over again. Perfect. Now I need this same data tip to write it to this block here. Right? So I'm going to go back and edit my tooltip. All right, but because I cannot edit the render, to go to the one that's already sitting on my screen here and edit it from here. And data flow. And this is the non-intuitive part. So I'm going to use a state block. Now, the target of my state block. So this state block will write that UUID. It has to write to the outside of the SVG repeater. So I cannot drag anything here to populate this path because I'm inside a symbol. And also I'm inside a symbol instance that it's a completely different context compared to what it will be when it's rendered inside a SVG repeater. So I cannot populate this target path by dragging. However, I can type, and that's what I'll do. So at stage, now this gets you to the symbol root level. Then at parent, this goes one level above the symbol, basically outside, which would be your SVG repeater. Then dot hover zone, that's the name of my stream block that I designated. I want to keep my zone ID that I'm hovering over. Dot value is the property that I'm trying to affect. Right? That's going to be my path. So I'm going to click out and then click back in just so properties get updated. And now I have a change, basically a target value. So I'm going to use my UUID symbol property to write to that hover zone stream block. The last thing I need is the event. And for the event, I want to use the UUID itself. The idea is that every time SVG tooltip is generated, right, this ID will gain some value, and that value will cause it to invoke itself and write that value to my stream block outside. Right, so let's see how well that works. So we're gonna go and keep looking at the stream block, and this is the block that I was targeting with my path. So let's see if I did it right. So as I mouse in, notice that my ID is being written to it. So now I know what I'm hovering over. However, what is not happening is I'm not clearing it out when I hover out of the zone, right? The last hovered zone ID is still there. So I don't know technically if my mouse is still in the zone or not. So we can fix that, right? By force clearing it out when I'm over the capture group, right? Remember, because in between the zones, the capture group captures the mouse. So I'm going to use a state block. All right, so my target will be, of course, this, my hover zone. So value will be null because I want to clear it out. I also want to disable or enable disabling serialization so it does not get serialized. And by the way, I have to do the same inside the symbol. So clear it out here as well. So it's going to get saved with a page. I'm going to invoke this state block on the mouse move of my capture group. So basically, anytime your mouse is over the capture group, it will clear out my hover zone. Okay, so let me go ahead and while I'm still remember, I'm going to go into my SVG tooltip and turn off serialization on this state block as well. Again, it's a good practice to do that on any state block where you don't want the value that it writes to be saved with a page. So let's open this up. Again, I'm going to reset this. All right, and let's see how this works. So mouse in, mouse out, in, out. Right? Okay, so now we know basically who's being hovered over. Now we need to know who's being clicked. So clicking is simple. So what I need to do is I need to take this UUID and transfer it over to the click zone if I clicked it. So that's going to be obviously another state block. All right, make it bigger. Its target will be the clicked zone. And yes, we're going to disable serialization yet again. All right, its value will be hover zone. And its click will be the click of the SVG repeater. And so just expand to all my events. Here's on click. Bam. Okay. so let's see how well that performs. Click. There it is. Click. Click. Right. So now we know who's hovered and who's clicked. Now we're ready to actually change styling based on that information. Okay, so for that, let's go ahead and get both of those values, take them with us. So we'll have to come back here and go to the logic of my SVG code, which is, I believe, somewhere. Yeah, actually, well, it's right here. So, so in order for me to basically be able to insert parameterized values, which would be, of course, the opacity and the fill color, into my SVG code, they have to exist in the table. Otherwise, I can only hard code them. Hard coding would not work here. So first, I need to go back to my table that contains all my zones, which is here. Right now, it only has UUID and coordinates. I need to add a few more fields, but not literal fields, because I don't need to type values in them. I need to use a column mapping block to add 2 more columns, which will be calculated. Right? So input will be my zones table. Of course, I'm taking all the original columns with me. I'm adding a column called opacity. I'm just going to use OPP, and one more called color, like so. And they're going to come, let me move this out of the way. So their values will come from an expression. I'm going to use a replace block to create that expression for each one of them. Expression will be as follows. So starts with equal sign, as any expression would, in the column mapping block. And then we're going to compare UUID field, right? So I'm just going to refer to it by name, whether it equals to UUID placeholder, right? And if it is, then I want my opacity to be 0.7 was 0.7, right? And if it's not, it's going to be 0.4, right? And of course, I need to make sure I have 0 in there. And I need to make sure that I replace my placeholder. Whoa. So there's no way with the actual UUID of, in this case, hover zone, because I'm working on opacity. There. When I hover over, we see it gets inserted in there. And you have an expression that can go into the from. Right? And I need one more. This one will be for color. Colors, I need to actually get the hex values for the colors that I want. So let's use for non-clicked will be this green. Why not? So this will be the else. Right. And for the clicked one, let's use this yellow orange-ish color. This will be the true case. There. And of course, the binding that should go in there is a click zone. This color will be changed based on the click, not on the hover. And that goes into the from over here. So if we've done things correctly, you should see the opacity and the color change when I hover over a zone. So this, right? So you see the opacity change. So here in the first row. And when I click, right, you also see the color change as well. So now we can use those in our SVG code. Before we do that, we need to make sure we actually bind this to our SVG repeater. Right now it's bound from the zones table, bind from this column mapping block, which includes our new column. Okay, so now we're ready to go back to our SVG replace block that creates this SVG item that gets repeated. Go in here, and replace the fill, which is currently lime. We're going to replace it with a column reference. All right, color is the name of the column. That's what we've done. And for the stroke, opacity, for opacity, we're going to replace it with, again, column reference of the opacity column. Okay, so we get something like this, right? So hovering over now makes it darker, and clicking makes it change the color. All right, so now that it works, we are ready to actually visually hide this data tip, as we don't actually need any visual aspect of it. I'm going to go back here, edit this, and simply turn off visibility. All right, and done. And I can delete it from here now, right? Remember, I'm not deleting the actual symbol. I'm just deleting this instance that I used to edit the symbol. And so the symbol itself is still perfectly happy here in my symbols. Okay, so we have a drawing tool that allows you to, that knows basically when you hover over a zone and when you click on the zone. So we're ready to make use of this, this new functionality. The first thing that I want to do using this is add ability to delete a zone. Right now we have no way to delete it there other than going to the table and manually deleting a zone that we don't need. So let's go ahead and add the delete button. We can add it right to this toolbar on top. So I'm going to insert another group laid in there, horizontal laid out, flex end basically. So components will be stacked on the right, and vertically centered inside. So let's do tools is the name. Right, and inside I'm going to add a button. It's just going to be regular text. It's going to say delete. It's going to be white text on red background. Right, with a bit of pixel space all the way around, and just a bit of round corners like this, and of course the hand cursor. So this is what it looks like. This button will delete a zone that's currently clicked. So I'm going to name it delete in the outline, so really tell what it is, and we're ready to make it work. So first thing I need is I'm going to go to my SVG repeater and grab the clicked zone. All right, so just take it with us here. Go to our button. Oh yeah, one more thing. Need the actual table that contains all the zones, because to delete anything, we actually have to delete it from this table. So take both with us. And now go back to the button, and let's create some logic. So if you remember prior lessons in this channel, we're going to need to use remove rows to delete something from a table. And so this zones is the table, that's the target. We need a condition. So condition will be dynamic because we need to check for this UUID. So that means replace block or concat block, depends on your preference. And again, expression, actually no, so here we don't need equals. This is not column mapping block. So here we can just say UUID equals, UUID. Right, so UUID is the column name, and this will be our placeholder, which we are going to replace right here with actual UUID. So that's the expression that we'll get. And we'll use it in our condition here. And of course, the click, the button is what's going to execute this. However, oh yeah, one more thing I want to happen after that is executed. I want to make sure that we clear out the clicked zone, right? Because right now, if we delete a zone, this value will stay in there But the zone will no longer exist. So as a next step with a state block, right? I want to take my click zone and set it to nothing. And of course, disable serialization like everywhere else. Right, and it's going to happen on complete. So I'm going to pin this there. And one last sanity check, or maybe not sanity check, but basic verification. I don't want this to see this button if nothing is clicked. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to, oops, I think I closed my UUID too early. So I'm going to bring back the clicked ID, clicked zone. I'm going to check the length. Right, of this clicked zone UUID. All right. And I'm going to say that its length is, if length is over 0 characters, means there's something in there, then true, else false. And that's going to drive the display property of a button. Why display and not, and not visible? Because display will actually make it not render. So not only will be invisible, it will also not take any space. It will not affect any components that may be near or around it. So if there was a button next to it, if I turn off display, that button would slide to the right and take this place as if the delete button never existed. If I simply set invisible, visible to false, then the button is still there. It's just not visible. So this, as you can see, actually makes it not render. So that's what I want to do. Have that, control that. So let's try and delete the zone. Data flow doesn't tell us anything interesting. So click a zone, you delete, right? Done. Click a zone, you delete, and we're done. Okay, so that part works pretty well. Next step, so we can now create a zone. We can now delete a zone. We need ability to add some information about that zone. Just want to stay with two properties for now, name and node. Node would be basically a path of the device that controls that zone. In my case, let's say a VAV. All right, so I have a VAV box mapped somewhere in my server, and I want to keep the path to that VAV with the zone, so I can later, basically, when I render this somewhere else, I know where to go for data. So for that, we're going to need to create a simple form. So let's get started with that. All right, so we're going to start by just adding a group. Everything starts with a group. And giving the group some basic sizing, maybe 300 by 250. Give it a background so we can tell it apart. I'm also going to give it a box shadow, so when it appears to be over things, and some rounded corners because I like them. And I'm going to make it a symbol right away. So convert to symbol. I'm going to call this zone data. Yay. Okay. So now let's get into the symbol. Make it vertical. And immediately add a header. All right, so just insert a group, give it a fixed height, say 30, and make sure that height is not shrinkable because, well, you wouldn't want to shrink a header. So there. course, the header itself is horizontal, consisting of two items, both texts. In this case, I'm not going to bother with looking for icons. I'll just use text for text and text for icons as well. So this is going to be my label text. And I'll just keep it hard-coded as edit zone info. And another one, just to duplicate that, except this guy will be not shrinkable. Won't be 100%. It'll be simply 30 by 30. Like this. And yeah, it's going to be an X. There. Why text? Well, because this is a episode about Zone Tool, not about looking for icons on Google. Anyway, so this is what we have. This is the header. Yeah, why not? Let's add an outline here so we can tell where the header ends and everything else begins. All right, and while we're here, let's make this symbol draggable because it's just very easy. On the very root level of the symbol, right? Not the symbol stage itself, but the first group that actually contains the symbol. All I have to do to make it draggable here is drop and drag position block and provide two events to start and stop dragging. Right? My event to start dragging is going to be this label here. It's going to be basically grabbable. That's what you grab to drag. Now, why don't I want to make the whole header grabbable? Because this will make it difficult to hit the X button to close it. Because when you try to click the X, it'll also grab the header at the same time. So the label, let's actually name it. There. So the label is going to be my grabbable item. So I'm just going to use on mouse down from the label to start dragging. On mouse up global. Why global? Well, because I want to stop dragging when I let go over anything, right? Even if I'm no longer over this header. Otherwise, you might have some issues when you move it to the side. Your mouse jumps off your header, and then the mouse up will not fire if you're not over the item. So mouse up global it is. And then one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to link is dragging. This is a feedback to let me know if it's being dragged to the cursor. This using control to get the binding dialog. Using a boolean here. So if it's true, meaning if it's being dragged, I'm going to use this clutched hand. Otherwise, I'm going to freehand. So this will show us the cursor. So it would look like this, right? So here, when I mouse over, you have this kind of open hand. You click and start dragging, right? And clutches and kind of lets you drag the box around. All right, so little gimmick, right? Not directly related to the topic at hand, but why not? So next, I'm going to add a group. I'm going to call content, and that's the one that's going to contain the properties that I want user to fill in. Add some spacing all around, and add another group, which is going to be a single property. So full size and no shrink. And fixed height, right? That's going to be the group. Horizontal layout, center vertically. Another text in there. So text. This is going to be the name of the property, or label, that is. I'm going to make it fixed, 90, just so that things are aligned when I have multiple. Right, so this is going to be zone name. Let's call this prop. 10 pixel gap. And I'm going to insert a form element, text input. Right? This is where a user will be able to type things in 100% wide, but flex, shrink, and grow enabled, so it only grows enough to fit 30 pixels. A little bit of rounded corners, frame around it, and white background. All right, and need to give it a little spacing on either side, like this. So primary font will be dark, very dark gray, and then placeholder will be kind of barely visible. So remove the text value from here and set placeholder is zone name. And so you just prompt it to enter the zone name. Now I'm not going to bother with validation. I will not force user to specify these. If he does, it'll get it'll get written. If he doesn't, well, the empty string will get written. So I'm not going to do the validation. In your case, you may have to. In my case, I don't want to. And another property would be for zone. Let's do device. Right, and here I can't use text input. I don't want the user to type things in here because he'll likely misspell the device name, and then good luck finding that. So I'm going to insert another form element called list. Right? And kind of visually, I'm going to treat it the same way as my text input. So now, the important thing to know about list element, as well as a few other form elements, is not every browser respects the styling that you set for it. So some browsers like Chrome does, for example, or at least Chrome on PC does. But for example, on Mac doesn't care how you style your list, your dropdown. It will use standard Mac dropdown. And nice thing about it, on the mobile, this will also be replaced with a mobile control, which is a lot nicer than something you would build. That works well on the desktop, but not so much on mobile. Anyway, so this is going to be text. We're going to work on options in a second. Our placeholder with same colors. There. Okay, so that's going to be the drop down, the device. So where I'm going to get values? Well, if I recall from prior lessons, again, I have some mock VVs created here. Right, these VVs here. Let me go ahead and delete the new node. Don't need it. So I just have VVs and nothing else here. So I'm going to use these to populate my list here. So what this means is that I'm going to use list node. And I'm going to use HVC as my parent, holding control so it doesn't bind, but rather populate the path. And so this is what it gets us, right? What I care about is name and path. But what I want is a combination of these two. So I can use basically comma-separated values where each value is a column-separated label and value pair. So let me show you what I mean. So I'm going to use column mapping block. You see that I use this block a lot, and that's the case. It's one of the most commonly used blocks when you work with data. So I'm going to call my new column value. I'm not going to take any other columns with me, right? So and value is going to consist of name column plus colon plus path. Right, so this will look like this as the result. So name, then colon, then the path. And you have to be careful. If your name could be strictly numeric, then you would have this may error out because it's going to try to add a character to what it thinks is a number. And so in this case, you would have to make sure this does not happen by first casting it to string type like this, and then it won't try to do math with your name. Instead, it will actually do a character operation just by adding that column. Right, so result is the same, but in my case, of course, my names are contain letters and numbers, so there's no way this could be mistaken for a numeric value. But if you could have a name that's purely a number, then you want to cast it to a string explicitly so that you don't get invalid operation of trying to add a character to a number. There we go. Anyway, so now we just need to aggregate this newfound table with a single column. So column value is what I'm aggregating. And the aggregation method will be concat, which will basically list all the values separated by a comma. So now you can take this and use this as your options list. Right? This gets you something like this now. Okay? So these two are values I want user to pick. Now I'm going to go and change my content now to be, well, first of all, I don't want to flex, shrink, or grow the content. I'm going to make it, I'm going to reset the height, which makes the content auto-sized. So it will basically get downsized to the size of the properties inside, right? So I have 2, so it's this big now. If I add another one, right, it grows by that much. So, so basically my dialog will be as big as it needs to be, but no bigger. And that now I can make the whole dialog also auto size like this. So what I'm missing here, of course, is the button, right? Button to accept this, or 2 buttons, OK and cancel. So I'm going to add another group, and, fixed height, no shrink. This is going to be my footer, and that's what's going to contain my buttons. Horizontal layout, center vertically, flex and, because I want buttons to be stacked towards the right-hand side. And then let's add save. Pardon me for not bothering with any more styling for the buttons. Again, in the interest of time. And let's add some spacing between those two. There. I think save goes on the right. Sorry, I can't recall for sure, but let's say it does. All right, maybe a little less spacing and more spacing here, like so. Okay, so now let's think what properties this box will need to ingest. So first of all, it's going to have to make changes to the zones table. That's where it's going to put this information. So at the very least, it needs to be able to take a table in. Right? Next, needs an event to close itself. Right, so trigger called close. It also, I think, needs an event to know that you've canceled, because on cancel, I misspelled. I think I want to clear out the clicked zone. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to use it yet, but I'll add it just in case. Yeah, I need the ID of a zone that I'm currently working on. UUID. Okay, that should be enough. So with that, I'm going to save the changes. I'm going to delete this from here, that instance that I created. It's still here in my symbols. And I'm going to actually use it as a callout on my canvas. Right? I cannot add a callout to individual zones because they don't have callout property. I can add a callout to actually, yeah, let's do that. I may want to have another callout at some point, so I'm going to add a callout to the SVG repeater itself. So I'm going to expand the callout section. Remember, you can add callout to just about anything. So I'm going to choose this type of callout that comes with 2 events to show and hide the callout, and just center it on screen. And I'm going to use this what I've just built, which is zone data symbol, as the symbol for the callout. There it is, nicely shown here. 0 animation on load, so it doesn't fade in, but rather just appears. I am going to make it modal, so nothing else can be touched while it's popped up. and kind of gray out the rest of the screen a bit so you can tell that nothing can be touched. So auto size it. Right? This is where that's those settings where I set auto size and height. That's where they pay off. And that's it. So now I can grab, so this is my callout render here. So now I can grab my close event and my close button and just bind it straight to the height trigger, right? Because we know what's going to close the callout, this close event, which nothing triggers the event yet, but we'll do that inside the callout. Right, show trigger, right? So what I think I want to do to show is a right click. So I want to do, rather than using this clicked state, I want to use a right click on the zone to show this pop-up. Right? But I want to make sure that I'm over the zone when I'm right clicking, and only then show it. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to check the length of my hover zone. And if that length happens to be over 0, then I want to pass the right click event. It's going to be found during events properties or under events list under actions, same thing. So on right click, I'm going to pass it on to the output. If it's 0, so if I'm not hovering over, then that right click will not get passed to the output. So, and of course, the output then goes to show trigger, like that. Right? And so what do we need? Well, we need to pass the actual UID, this here. We need to pass the actual table, the SVG editable table, which is this one here, where we store all the zones. To pass it in so this symbol can operate on it. And now we're ready to go and edit this callout to do stuff. So first, let's see how well it shows up. So if I right click here, nothing happens. When I'm over zone and I right click, look at that, I get the callout. No way to close it yet, but at least it pops up. So let's edit our callout. Looks like I can't edit anything that's under SVG repeater, so I'm going to have to edit from here. Zone data. Oh, so let's see if it'll let me double click and spot. Yay, okay, that works. So even though in the right click menu, the edit doesn't show up, but if you double click on the callout while selecting the component on which it exists, you can still edit this in context. And it's important to edit in context because now, right, I have my zones table populated, I have my UUID, so I can actually set up logic with existing things, which is a lot easier than trying to keep everything in mind and not seeing it in properties. So first things first, let's get the close working, right? So it's going to close on 2 events, well, 3 events. It's going to close and close button. So let's do this. I'm going to use a state block. And state block is going to trip this on the close trigger. Except I'm going to change this path. Right now it's a relative path, right? It's trying to go from where this button is and go, kind of up, 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 then down to parameters and to close. So I'm going to replace this with at stage, right? This path now refers to exactly the same thing. It refers to this property, but top down, right? So the reason I'm doing this is not forget to turn off station here. The reason I'm doing this is now I can copy this block, state block, paste it to any other component, and it will work, right? The path will always be true because with a relative path, it's only true for this location because it has to go that number of parents up before it finds the property. This way, top down, right, this path will stay true for regardless of where the block exists. So first I need to add a trigger. A trigger, of course, be the click. And so now I can copy this and go to my other close button, which will be cancel, and add, paste exactly same block in here. And I don't need to change anything because this path is true from any location within the symbol. Right, and now on save, I'm going to need that on save as well, but not triggered by click, but it's going to be basically the last event in the chain of events. First event in the chain of events will be edit rows block right here. The target table will be, well, of course, zones. The condition will be something we've done many times before. So replace block. UID equals UID placeholder. And replacing the placeholder with, whatever's in our properties. Like this. And so this edit rows block will edit 2 columns, which we don't have yet, by the way, right? So our zones table, it doesn't yet have those columns. We're going to add them. So I'm sort of jumping ahead a little bit. So the column, first column will be name. The next one will be path. Name will, of course, come from the value of this box. So literally. And a path will come from value of this box, literally. Notice why I used this kind of label column value method, right? So label column value, comma, label column value, comma, and so on and so forth. Visually, you see VV-1-1, but the value output is the path of the VV1-1, right? So it makes it nice because I want to save the path, but I want to show the name. So in this case, right, saving the path, and then whatever name, zone name user types in, and on complete, of course, I want to invoke the state block to close it. All right, that should do. Right, so I think I'm ready to close this out. Before I do anything else, I have to go back to the zones table and add the columns that are promised to add. Otherwise, there'll be nothing to edit. So name and path. Now let's watch the magic happen. All right, so we'll just keep this table open and cross the fingers that everything works. So close it out. Well, we know the close works now. So let's do right click. Let's call this zone meeting room 1A. The device that controls it will be VV1-3. And we're going to save. Oh, we ran into a small bug in here. Looks like we lost. Yeah, that's okay. So that's going to happen because of how these form controls work. The modality of this of the callout is not always enough. So when it goes from your drop-down list back to the form for the brief moment, it will actually detect a mouth underneath and think that you moused out, which is bad. We don't want that because when you mouse out, you lose that ID. So now this form is sitting there without an ID, so it cannot save anything to the table because there's no ID to match. So let's fix that. So to fix that, instead of binding UUID to the form, right, which basically will appear and disappear as you mouse in and out, right, we're going to write it. So unbind, pop it up. We're going to write it and then on the right click. So what the same action that brings up the pop-up, which is show trigger, right, which is the right click, which is this, right? That very same action will write UUID to that property. All right, so we're going to target. Oh yeah, already brought it up here. Our target. No serialization as usual. And this is what we're writing. And we're writing on this output. So same exact event that opens the callout will also force the stay block to write UUID to the callout. That means from then on, it doesn't matter what happens to the UUID in here, right? The callout will have it. So let's try this one more time. So right click, meeting room 1G, right? -4, and you see that my zone, the hover has disappeared because it thought I hovered over out of the zone, but my form still has the UUID that it used to open, which means this is still true. So I should be able to save, but it will not save because I never linked the trigger to do that. My bad. Going back to the symbol, footer, save. You see that first of all, save doesn't have a hand over it. And also this logic does not have invoke linked. So we need on click. Like this. So this time it will work, I promise. So let's do one more shot at this. Cancel out. Right click. So, not zone, meeting room 1B -A VV1-5. Save. Yes. Okay. Look at that. So we've stored this information. There's one caveat here. When we go back and right click, it'd be nice if we could show it, right? So let's try to show it. So I'm going to edit this. I'm still kind of, those are still passed in. So it's not difficult to show them. So what I'm going to do is go in here, right, and filter my zones table for the row that matches this. So I'm going to use a filter. Right, and the condition for that filter is going to be exactly the same as the condition for the edit rows block. So I'm going to copy it from here, go back here and paste it. And just need to rebind because the binding is no longer relevant. So I'm going to rebind the UID. That's the condition. That's the table. There. So basically, I just filtered out for the row that matches the zone I just clicked on. And so I'm going to go to my form fields here. I'm going to bind this name to the value. And I'm going to go to the drop down, right, and bind this path. So done. Okay, so now when, go ahead and cancel. When I pop it up, show that it's already there. So let's go to another one. Here, nothing is here. So let's call this Bob's office. Hopefully this apostrophe is not going to kill us here, but it shouldn't. 1-6, save, right? So when we go back here, this is meeting room 1B. We go here, right click. This is Bob's office. Okay, so one last step, I promise. Basically, we need ability to take this whole information we've just accumulated about our zones, wrap it up, right, and save it somewhere so we can use it. So basically, items that we want to save are this table, everything inside. Right, so I'm going to pop it up. And basically the path of the floor plan image. Clicking around too much. Path of the floor plan image. So this path here, I'm going to bring that as well. And lastly, I also want to save the size of my canvas. We're not doing much with it, so we could technically just get the size from the image. But if we ever add any scaling options, it'd be nice to carry the size with us. So these 4 items I want to basically turn into a JSON and save it as a file so that in the next episode next week, we would be able to use that file to render this stuff. So let's go in, in toolbar, and I'm going to add here, I'm just going to duplicate delete button because I'm somewhat lazy. I'm going to say save. Going to be a save button. Maybe save config. Right, and it's not going to be red. Let's make it green. For now, it'll be just visible. That's not very nice. Darker green. That. Right. So it's not going to have any remove things in here for sure. Right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use make object block here. And I'm going to add 4 things. One will be a table. So this will be my geometry. 1 will be string, will be image path. Right? And 2 would be width, numeric, of course, and height. Right, so our zones table will go into, zones table will go into geometry. Image path will go into, of course, image path. Oops, my height didn't come out to be numeric, so 1 more number, height, there. Then width and height. Right, so it creates this JSON object that contains all that info. Right, so what I want to do is just save it as a JSON file. So for that, if you recall prior lessons, string uploader. Right, so the path I want to put it under, I'll just create, I already have a folder called configs. Probably already something in there, so let me just delete it. This is from prior attempts. So this is going to be where I want to put stuff in. So I'm going to use concat. All right, so start with configs, add a slash, and then I'm going to ask the user to type in. So just add a form element, text input. All right. No initial value. Actually, just go initial value will be new config. Right. Yeah, and there, this would normally be done with validation and all the other neat stuff. We're simplifying it for the purpose of time conserving and JSON. And that's going to be where I'm going to place my new file at. And of course, this object will be the data. And it's going to happen on click. Done. Okay. Probably want to length check my name here, so I don't allow saving if there's no name. Otherwise, well, it's not going to do anything good in my file system here. So if basically here, if it's more than 0, then I'm going to show the save button. Well, I'm going to show, but I'm going to at least enable the mouse. And also, I'm going to affect the opacity with it, again, holding control. And I'm going to say if it's true, 100% opacity, otherwise 50. So basically, if I have no name, my button will be unclickable and dimmed. So it's going to look like this, right? So let's give it a name. It's visible. Yeah. So that should do it. So let's click it. Save, right? So let's in here. So that's our JSON. So we just saved everything we've done. And that should be enough information to actually go anywhere else and just to render the whole thing, right? The floor plan and zones and zone names and all that good stuff. So, but that's all for next week. For now, this is as far as we go. I will make a link to this file. I will add it in the video description so you can actually download this and play with it or build on top of it. Do whatever you wish with it. And other than that, we're done. And I want to say back to the studio, but again, we're not doing the studio this week. So I'll see you next week.